Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man so masculine, his favorite cereal is elk-flavored Meteos. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who believes vegetables only exist to feed his food.
I think that's my next business idea.
Elk-flavored Meteos?
Yeah.
Dude, you're going to be rich.
Be rich in the carnivore category.
If you're looking for a seed investor, we might have a few in the room with us today. So,
meat cereal. I feel like I make meat cereal already. It's just basically ground beef, but
is that actually? Yeah, that is actually what you eat for breakfast. No, that's actually. I didn't even know that when I wrote that. Man, that's the Lord's work. Anyways, we have with us, and I'm excited about this because I don't think I've ever actually been this excited to have two podcast guests at the same time with us, and also both second-time guests. We have with us today Pastor Keith Kraft and Josh Kraft, Pastor Josh Kraft.
we were just talking about before the show. Pastor Keith has his own sound effect, which gets played like 4 times every episode.
Literally.
But we needed a Pastor Josh.
You are
sound
by
effect.
far the most quoted. Like the
So
gong.
I get half of Garrett's noise.
You don't get the bullets.
Like, I don't get the guns. You don't want me to do that.
No,
but
I mean,
you
the
can
gun-
have half of Garrett's.
Yeah.
It's what you can attain to.
I mean,
it's good.
Look,
I'm here for it.
I
I've
didn't
seen
pick
Josh lay down the lead. He's capable.
Yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of.
Hunting stories with you are like some of the favorite, are some of the best stories. So, all right. So, why are we having Pastor Keith and Pastor Josh here with us today? We're going to talk. Like, I want to say to everybody that's out there, I was thinking about this because we have a lot of people, literally all over the world and all over the country, and we're so blessed where we're at here in Dallas because we are part of Elevate Life Church, which you started in 2000, so it's 24 years old now. And there's things in this neck of the woods where we're at in DFW, in our little incubator of greatness, that are very normal, that are, you don't come in contact with them. Like, credit, obviously, you talk about building a culture that's by design and not by default, that promotes leadership and that creates the environment for what we have. And we have that, and it's easy to take it for granted because you're like, oh, it's sunny out. Like the same way people take the sun for granted, we have this environment where like generational legacy thinking, the thought about family, the thought about the roles and responsibilities of parents are very well versed in our church. And so recently, Pastor Keith released a book that we're going to get into called Dear Parent. And it's, I don't want to spoil it, but it's phenomenal. So we'll get into that. But I'm excited to share this because I think for a lot of people, if you're just a person that's pretty much not been around us, I don't know of anywhere else that this exists. I'm excited to share what we're about to share because we're going to share generational thinking. You're going to literally get to hear a father-son relationship walked out in a biblical manner, and we have them both in the room with us. So I think it's a very special day. So if you're out there, stop working out and actually listen. Don't get distracted.
I think one of the let's start here. I know you have some questions, Nick, but I'd like to start with, because I think it's one of the coolest things about the book, and I think it's also a fantastic representation of who Pastor Keith is the way that the book was written.
Yeah.
So will you talk about that, Pastor, how the book was first written?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's great to be with you guys. And Garrett is a son of choice of mine for a long time. Nick, you're more recent, but you seem like you're going to make the trip, so we're excited about that.
I don't have any other option at this point, man. Honestly, I've cut off anything else. So yeah.
But Garrett is as close to another son that I would have because I've been in his life his whole life, and was with his father as a friend and as a mentor before his father was married. And so we go way back. And so anyway, it's just an honor always to be with you guys and to just share these times together. I heard what a lot of people hear when they're growing up, and that is parents say, nobody taught me to be a parent.
Right.
Nobody's ever taught me to be a parent. And I don't know if that's a excuse by default or...
Yeah, it kind of seems like the only time they're saying that is when they're doing something stupid.
Just
Like, oh, sorry, no one taught me how to do this. I guess I'll just keep being wrong.
Yeah.
Ignorance is no excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you make a mistake in your marriage, the worst thing you could say to your wife is, "Hey, nobody taught me."
I don't know. When I was in my
It's
20s, I mean, I still work for you, but when I was early working for you, I would say, you'd be correcting me on something, and I would go, I don't know what I'm doing. And you'd go, you need to stop saying that at some point. You need to figure out what you're doing, not keep telling me you don't know what you're doing.
At some point, don't be so quick to say, nobody told me.
Like, it's obvious you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And so I grew up, and with all due respect to my parents, I would hear that from time to time, but especially from my mother. And it made me think about, like, I think early when you have a gift of leadership, and I knew I did early. I didn't know how to explain that, but I knew I did early, that it would be like I would observe them, and I was also a middle child, and so
Okay.
that's a whole nother perspective. And I've got a book that Josh is going to help me write. All the chapters or all the titles of the chapters are already done, but it's really lessons from the middle. But it's and then in parentheses it'll be child,
Right.
Because as a middle child, you get a very unique perspective of the older and the youngest. So I felt like I was always sitting in that seat of observation.
Yeah.
That gave me a very unique perspective. But I think perspective just as a study is very, very interesting. I know one of the things that Garrett says is he feels like one of his superpowers is perspective. I think for a lot of people that can be the case, but for a lot of people it's not the case. Well, why is it not the case? Because you have to want to learn. You have to want to grow. The reason you can have a unique superpower of perspective is because you're around people and you can literally think. And I first started saying what I'm about to say in 1984, and that is I'm going to make everybody my teacher. I can remember I was 24 years old and I said, I'm going to make everybody my teacher. And I was actually I was a youth pastor, and I was talking to a kid in my youth group, and he said, peace is priceless. And I said, man, that's so good. Because I've never been a person that's just focused on like peace. I don't know how to explain that except, again, from a perspective standpoint. So when he said peace is priceless, I went, I don't even think about peace.
Yeah.
But I can remember thinking in my mind all the way back then, thinking in my mind, wow, I'm gonna learn from that. Like, I'm gonna allow that perspective to make me understand peace better. And it did. It helped me understand, peace to me, before, and I'll come back to the question here, but peace to me is more like just doing nothing.
Right.
Like it means still, in my mind. I think when I think of peace, I would think early in my life, I would think peace be still. I would think Jesus on the boat, there's a storm, and they wake him up and he says, peace be still, and they're in awe. So for me, and I'm just giving you the thought behind where my perspective came from early on in my life when I was 24. So that's now been 40 years. So 40 years ago, is to get the perspective is that you can learn from anybody and you can learn from everybody. I made my kids my teacher. I made everybody my teacher. But with that said, Josh was about 5. Whitney was our youngest, was probably 1.5. Keela was 3. When I got this perspective of, wow, what would they like me to know if I was? Because that's what I found out. Like when my parents would say, particularly my mother would say, nobody taught me to be a parent. I would think, well. Like I could tell you a few things that I'd like you to do,
Right, yeah.
or I'd like you to think this way. Like for instance, I was an athlete. My parents had no perspective of or thinking in their mind that it would be good for them to come to games. It would be good for them to be interested in that. That it wasn't a problem for them to take me to a practice, which it was.
Right.
It was like, oh, we've got to go do this. And
Pastor, I want to jump in with you on something that, because it's what I know from your life, and it's actually something that I've talked to Nick about that I learned from you, because you're kind of suggesting this. So your parents didn't have, there was a lack of awareness in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And would you say that that's how you learned awareness, was from other people's lack of awareness? Because I've told Nick how growing up, how much instruction Josh got about awareness.
yeah. And your dad did too.
Garrett will look at me and he'll go, that's an awareness issue,
No, you
son. He says
just
it to
my
me all
dad.
the
We
time.
got to the point. My dad would just go awareness, son.
It's like a buzzword.
Oh
It
yeah,
was a curse word for Josh.
It was
He
like,
hated it.
Pavlov's
I'd be
dog.
driving with him. I mean, still to this day, he just almost can't help himself. He's like, "See that pothole in the road coming up?" I'm like, "Yes, sir, I see it." When I was in high school, it was like, you just ran right over the pothole. Did you not see it?
Yeah, did you see that?
No, Dad, I didn't. All right, awareness, son. Awareness.
So I would say again, mindfulness, awareness is what gives you perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Now, real quick, sorry, because
Okay.
we've Garrett blew up our plan. No Plan Survives First Contact. I was going to give people the background because we were talking about the book and diving into it, but I haven't actually explained to people what the book is. So real quick, the book is called Dear Parent. What makes this so unique? This book was written 32 years ago, and it was Pastor Keith's parenting philosophy that you wrote from the perspective of a child to his parents, and it ended up being 7 essential needs that all kids have that you would want your parents to know. You had a major publishing deal. You had the pen in your hand. You're ready to sign, and you said, "I can't do this."
And that's what I was given the background,
right?
Based on what Garrett was saying. But yes, so I'm kind of getting to that point of how I got to the point. So I started. What started to happen was.
So you heard people your whole life say, "No one taught me to be a parent."
No one taught me to be a parent, and so it gave me this awareness. It gave me a perspective that how can a parent know how to parent a child when they're just coming from a parent perspective?
Right.
So why not put yourself in a child's shoes? That's where it all started.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking. I can tell you that I started thinking that way when I was 24. By the time Josh was born, I was 28. So 4 years later, I started writing, and I wish I had it. I just didn't have. I did not. There were certain things that I didn't have like formulated. But I had an old laptop. It was so old that it was green on the screen.
Nice.
And that's how old it was. And I would when I would be on the road, I would write him. It was like, from a parent standpoint, what do I want him to know as an adult?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's where it started. So I thought, as a parent, what would I want him to know? So if you're a parent and you're listening to this, what do you feel like your children need to know as adults?
Right.
Because you're not raising children, you're raising adults.
Right.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it flipped. I started thinking, well, you know what? There's some parents that don't know what their child needs.
Right.
They're just parenting from a parent.
Yeah.
What they, you want your kid to become self-sufficient. You want your kid to have discipline. You want your kid to make right choices. You want all these things. But what does a child want his parents to know? So that's how it started. So by the time I was 32, again, Josh was 5, Keela was 3, Whitney was about 1.5. I started thinking, okay, what does every child wish their parents knew? And so at 32, I did have a book deal, and I can remember I'm sitting there getting ready to sign it, and I said, "Hey, I can't do this." And they said, "What? What do you mean?" I said, "It's theoretical. I'm not a theoretical person." They said, "What does that even mean?" I said, "What it means is that until something's proven, you shouldn't talk about it from an expert standpoint."
Yeah.
And I said, "I would like to, if I give some advice, it to be from more of an expert viewpoint, or why would anybody take my advice?" And which begs the question, everybody in this circle knows, why would you ever get advice from anybody that you don't respect? Why would you ever get advice from anybody or take advice from anybody that doesn't have fruit that you don't have? Why would, and this is where most people are in their life, they get advice from their peers. They don't that are at the same level or in the same era of life that they're in, right? So anyway, that's kind of the thought behind it. So I said, I'm going to wait till my kids are grown. I'm going to wait, and I want them to write on each chapter. Now, I didn't know it would take so long. I didn't know that they would have their own children, which that actually gave more credibility to it. But until Josh really helped our family engage in this process, it probably would have never happened. I just wasn't going to make them, "Hey, I want you guys to tell me how my parenting worked for you so we can publish it to the world." Josh was really the one that took the ball and said, "Hey, we need to do this because the book is virtually written. Nothing changed in the book except for chapter 7. Everything stayed the same, and the reason chapter."
Well, you updated, you updated the stats on. There's some stats at the beginning on the importance of fathers. We updated those. You added a chapter on single parents,
right?
And you added that chapter at the end about identity,
right?
Because of
all the madness,
the pronoun community that we're navigating.
Well, and it's not a pronoun community. It's a horrible parenting.
Right.
That's what it is. Like if your children are struggling with their identity, you are a horrible parent.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
Because you say, well, what does it mean? I mean,
So for a person who's just heard they're a horrible parent, what encouragement would you give them?
Read the book. No, but seriously, the reason I'm saying that is because a parent Okay, so by definition, a parent is one who begets a child.
Yeah.
And what you say in the book is that a father's job is to give their children identity. The mother's job is to nurture them.
Yeah, is to love them well. The father's first job is not to love their children well. I know that sounds crazy, but
You have like a bomb, a sensei
well, we
thing. Do
just-
the sensei thing.
yeah, yeah.
good.
The father's job is not to first love them well. A father's job first is to lead them well.
Right.
You can even see it in people. Like when you can see people who didn't really have a mom, who
Yeah.
weren't loved. And you can see certainly in men who most of us spend a lot of our time around, you can see in men who don't have an identity. It's like, man, that guy didn't have a dad.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is both principally true and anecdotally true, where when we look at men who you can tell they didn't have a father because they don't know who they are.
Well, yeah.
And it's also my favorite line from Lion King that Mufasa said,
Right.
"You've forgotten who I am, and so you don't know who you are."
Remember who you are.
Oh, we don't even need a sound effect for that. Josh got it on lock.
And that's really it. And so again, I know I'm saying it strong when I say that, but you need to be hit in the face
Yeah.
with the strength of that, because a child is a child. Of course they don't know. They don't know who they are. They don't know. And so if they're struggling with their identity, it's because you're doing a horrible job at speaking into who they are. And seeing, like talking about how great they are. So, for instance, I was with my grandchildren for the last several days, and one of the things that I did the whole time was speak into them based on who they are.
Yeah.
In other
So
words,
good.
talk to them about how they're going to be great worship leaders. Talking to them about how they're great sisters. What does it mean to be a great sister? Talking to them, in other words, speaking into them. And here's what I'll tell you. The beautiful thing about leadership is that's what creates the incubator for greatness.
Right.
Love doesn't create an incubator for greatness. It is the fuel
Right.
that makes it work. But you've got as a parent, you just have to work on your self-leadership, and you have to work on leading yourself well that gives your children something to follow. So I don't want to...
I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure the audience is probably wondering right now. I understand how you do it because I've spent so much time with you. But to a parent out there who's listening and saying like, okay, I need to speak identity into my children. How do I know what my children's identity is?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it starts with anything good that you see in your child. So anything that's good that you see in your child, you tell them the good that you see in them.
Yeah.
You speak that into them. And so Jesus in the Gospel of John, he makes 7 I am statements. What is so significant about understanding who I am? It'll determine what you do.
Yeah, 100%.
It'll determine who you align your life with. So it's like my I am is so important to manifest whatever it is that's supposed to happen in and through my life. So I think what a parent does, what a parent has the power to do, is to start with speaking. If I'm going to come from a biblical standpoint, and that's been the basis of everything that I've taught. It's like you are who God says you are.
Yeah. And most people don't know that, right? I mean, we talk about this in our church. 4% of Christians have a biblical worldview. I mean, there's a lot of people that call themselves a Christian that don't engage or interact with the Bible all that often.
Yeah.
I think too, one of the things you see a lot with dads specifically is they just see their identity, that they've defined as they're just a breadwinner for their family. They don't think it's their responsibility to embrace their kid's identity or teach their kids identity. I think what you see a lot on like the I would say like pretend masculine side is guys will drive their kids into what they think like you're going to be I have a friend who's a good baseball player. His dad wasn't a good baseball player, and his dad was like, you're going to be a pro baseball player. And then his son grew up to hate baseball, because of how hard his dad drove him towards baseball, that he tried to make his identity like a sport because that's what his dad got his ego from. Yeah, was having this successful son.
I think it comes from like what helps you speak greatness into your kids is both a spirit of generosity and of valuing the right things. So this is what I've seen you do, right? A parent who's just generous maybe, but doesn't have the right value system would say, well, I'm going to give my kids what I didn't have, right? And that's what we've seen so many in this generation do.
Right.
You give your kids too much money. You
Right.
get, I didn't have a car, I'll give you a car.
Yeah.
I didn't have this, I'll give
This
you
was
that.
hard. I don't want you to have hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus if you'll have generosity and a right sense of value, then it's like, I didn't have an identity, I'll help give you
Yeah.
one. I didn't know what mattered in life, I'll help you know what matters.
Yeah.
Right. So have that heart to give your children what you didn't have, but you got to value the right things.
See, the point is generosity is not something you do. Generosity is who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's when I talk about identifying the good in your kids, I'm not talking about a good deed. I'm talking
Right.
about an attribute
Yes.
they have. I'm talking about a characteristic that they have. And so to speak from a father, one of the things about a father that's unique with a son is that's different than a father with a daughter is a father with a son has a number one responsibility of reproducing the best part of himself in a son.
Yeah.
Daughters are different. Why? Because someday they're going to marry a man. Someday they're going to take on a last name. So they'll have some characteristics. They'll have some ways that hopefully through core values, and I know you guys talk about that a lot, but these are the things that matter most in our family. They'll be able to have some identity aspects of their life addressed by a father. But with a son in particular, you've got to see your son as my primary job is to reproduce. So it's not, as a parent's job is not just to beget a child.
Yeah.
It's to, as much as possible, reproduce the great qualities, not just good, but great qualities that are in you.
And I wanted to point out something about the book that's so unique. Like you said, you wanted to wait until your kids were old enough to say if it worked. What's amazing about this book, like we said, it's 7 chapters. It highlights 7 unique needs. In each chapter, you have the original writing that you did 32 years ago, and then each of your kids, this is what I think is the magic, because a lot of people, when you start talking about the way you think and philosophical and things like that, some people will switch off. What I think is great about the book is your kids go into the how-tos. Like, okay, you write the letter like, this is what I need, this is why I need it. And then your kids go, this is how my parents played it out for me. And I'm going to read an excerpt later on because I want to show how that works. But what I'll say to people, you're like the Indiana Jones of templates, man. Like you say that success is hidden in templates,
Yeah.
and you have mined so many templates. It's definitely got to be a God-given gift. And what the reason I'm saying this is for you that are out there. Like when Pastor Keith is saying these things, I would just encourage you. You don't have to understand them. There's fruit in his life. I would highly encourage you to do them more than anybody in my life, literally in my entire life. There's so many things that you do that I heard you do. I looked at your life and I was like, I'm going to do them. And one of the things I heard you say to the point of this question is you gave all your kids nicknames because you wanted to give them something special as their identity.
Yeah.
And when the first time I heard you say, hey, fathers, if you're out there, it's your responsibility to give identity to kids, I sat up because here's the question. If you're listening to this, what does your last name mean? Truthfully, beyond whatever Germanic or whatever roots it came from, what does it mean to have your last name? You were the first person that highlighted it to me, and then you start talking about core values, which Josh obviously has your family crest tattooed on him and your family mission statement. And it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'd never heard that before, that you can go and be the person that gives the definition of what it means to be, in my case, a surface. And then obviously being around Garrett and his family who grew up with you, it's like Garrett says all the time, he heard when he was growing up, that's not what Uncle Box do, because it was an identity thing. And so to people that are just like going, okay, what do I do? Like you said, I mean, you speak to the best parts of which is an attribute. Do you mind sharing the nickname for each of your 3 kids?
Yeah. So Josh was champion, obviously, because I named him after Joshua in the Bible.
Yeah.
Which means champion.
Yeah.
And so I would speak that into him. Like I remember
There
once.
was also like a second one that was Speedy.
Yeah.
That's still,
Yeah.
we're still believing that one in faith.
My dad still calls you Speedy.
It was
That was ironic.
it was a faith nickname. It was like he's gonna get to where he can go fast.
tinged with some motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. See, what happens is people decide by default how they naturally are. Now, here's what's changed. For instance, in Josh, in his mid-30s, is that now he's able to pivot very speedily. In fact, he's so speedy, everybody's going, wait, no, wait. Well, I've been speaking that into him for a long time.
Right.
And it transcends his personality, but he's going, okay, let's go. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
And so anyway, champion. And then for Keela, it was Daisy.
Yeah.
And the reason, there's 2 reasons. The funny thing is that she would always daze.
Right.
Okay. So, but I love that.
Yeah.
Like I love that she just like look off and she would like lock in, And the other thing is I told her, I said, you're like a flower, you know. And then for her name, actually, I spoke to her name. Her name is half Keith and half Sheila. It's my wife, Keela. That your name literally means you're the key. So in every relationship, in every situation you walk in, you're a key. So if there was a nickname for her in terms of her identity, it's like you're the key. You're the key to making your marriage work. You're the key to be the key. All right. And then Whitney was Giggles. And the reason Whitney was Giggles is because she brought joy into our family, and she brought oxygen. I call her my oxygen. And she really, her and I, what's interesting, we do a deal called Working Genius, right, Josh?
Yes, sir.
I mean, how would you describe that profile? Just
Working Genius it's from Patrick Lencioni. It just shows your working style, how you work. There's basically you go from a 50,000 foot view down to like a 10-foot view of how you approach work, and everybody has different working genius that they bring to the team, and it's split up into basically 3 parts. There's ideation, which is like coming up with a plan. Then there's like this discernment piece, which is figuring out if it's a good plan. And then there's implementation. It tells you where you fit within there.
So what's great is that even within our family, Whitney and I's working genius is the same.
Okay.
So it's discernment and it's galvanizing. So when in other words, she's able to like lean in with me, and so like even was it Game of Thrones that had the hand? You know, the guy that was the hand.
That's right.
Like that's what I call Whitney. I call her the hand. Why? Because she's gonna discern like I discern that's good. No, that's not good. And then she's also a galvanizer. Like she can bring people together. And even though she's an introvert, still, I'm just saying. It's like you utilize tools to connect with your children. You utilize names that you speak over them to connect with them. That's it. There were many things I would speak over them, but yeah, that was the nickname part.
And we're like, we're gonna link to the book, so we keep talking about the book. We'll link to the book you get on Amazon. It's the best $20 you'll spend. But think about this, like what Pastor Keith is saying, because here's what happens if you don't have that intentionality, right? Like, how much would you like to know when you're 18 a lot of what makes you special, because it's been spoken over you your whole life? I mean, if you listen to this podcast for long, you know Garrett's story, and you know how he knew who he was before other people did, which is why he was able to go into the environment he did and do things that he did. But for those that you don't, what happens? You turn 18, suddenly you have all this freedom, and you're like, you don't know who you are, so you're just going to start trying whatever comes along, which means it's down to the randomness of who you encounter. And you said it earlier about some of the stats from the beginning of your book. It talks about 85% of youths in prison grew up in a fatherless home, right? And that's according to the Fulton County, Georgia jail populations and the Texas Department of Corrections. So that's what we're saying. If you as a father don't understand, and you know the extreme is you have no father around at all, what are you doing? Right. You're going out and looking for your identity from everybody else, and guess what? You're going to find something, and thus we have the confusion of the world that we have, where family's been under attack for such a long time. So, like, I remember when I heard you say that, it was like a lightning bolt to me of responsibility, and that's why I'm encouraging people. Like, you need a template to follow, and most people don't have a great template. So,
well, and I think that what people do is they tend to. I think the first gate to clear that is just the wrong thing for you to think is, do I agree with this? Right? Because if you're the Bible, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 12:2, says, don't be conformed to this world, but allow God to transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. So you have to fundamentally admit, if you didn't grow up in a family with great parents, your thinking about parenting is just fundamentally broken. Like, you kind of have to admit that so that you can adopt patterns that are not natural to you. I mean, it's like if you've never run before and someone takes you on a run, they kind of have to. I remember when me and Garrett did this at different times. I'm 3 years older than him, but in high school, they probably do the same thing. But there was this training called acceleration training. Right. They would show you how to run faster. So in high school, I got to where I could run a 4.740 because they taught me how to run. Really? Yeah. I mean, so
it's professional.
You go for 3 months and they retrain you how to run physically. So they teach you how to, instead of most people by default, they will move the same leg and arm at the same time when they run. So that makes them actually slower. So what you have to do is you have to learn how to pick your knees up when you run. You have to learn how to move your right arm when your left leg's going up. There's all these different techniques.
A bunch of specialized skills and specialized muscular training.
Mobility, hip flexibility, all that. And you have to go get faster. You have to admit the way that you run is fundamentally broken and has to be retrained. And they spend all of this time with you.
Quite a few times.
Yeah. That was the first day you're on
they gut check you.
You're on one of those crazy treadmills and you're just like you're all out sprinting for 15 seconds and you're stopping for 30. You're like, oh, I could do this. And then you get about 5 minutes in, you're like, I can't do this anymore. So, but that's an analog of what it looks like to retrain yourself to be great. I mean, the average person doesn't have great parenting. The average person doesn't have great templates. And if you're an adult, you have to go, I'm going to intentionally break this, and it's going to feel super uncomfortable and it's going to hurt a little bit, but I'm going to adopt a better template so that I can win.
Yeah.
Well, the reason both of our parents put us in that training is because they had proven results.
Yeah.
Right. And so for a lot of us, we the type of people like who Pastor Keith is, which Pastor Keith is a pioneer.
Yeah.
I love, they're some of my favorite people in American history, are the frontiersmen.
Yeah.
And they were few and far between. And some of them like had lots of courage. They never came back home. And only a few of them really forged great paths that other people followed. And so most of the truth is most of us are just not pioneers. You're going to follow another pioneer's path. And you want to look at those pioneers. There were pioneers that came back from the frontier, and they had scars. They'd been shot with arrows. Their back was chewed up from a grizzly bear if they survived. And you had other frontiersmen who came back with pictures in their journal with detailed notes of, hey, follow, this is the path you want to take. This is what you'll see when you get here. This is the value that's down this road.
Yep.
And like I see Pastor Keith as that type of pioneer. And so the point that I'm making is we all need a template for parenting, but you got to follow someone who actually has the fruit. Pastor Keith has the fruit in his journal of, hey, if you go down this path, this is what it looks like. And that's the reason to read a parenting book, is so that you have a template, you have a path to walk down. You're going to follow somebody else's path, follow the path of someone who's produced great fruit.
Yeah, well, it's the reason why, hopefully you're listening to this podcast. It's the reason why people get coaching or even read in general. Like I think that the perspective that people have on being stuck in ruts is kind of wrong.
Yeah.
I think
I heard a great talk about that.
I talked recently about it, but I love this example from the Roman Empire of they would, the people that used most of the roads in the Roman Empire were the military, and they had a certain width that their chariots were, this 56.5 inches wide. And that ended up standardizing how wide all the wagons were, right?
So crazy.
And so they would teach you when you were learning how to drive a wagon or a chariot to find the via rupta. And the via rupta in Latin means the broken way. And it wasn't called the broken way because the road is broken. It was called the broken way because in a lot of places, it was the only way through the forest. It was the only way through the mountain pass. There had been a lot of other people that had died.
It was broken in.
It was broken in, and it had broken through something.
Right.
And so when you get, we all have to find a rut, really, is what we have. And the rut's got to go to the right place. And so the Romans would teach that this road that's a broken way, where you're in the ruts, you're actually going to get there. When you get out of the ruts, that's when you break your wheels.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people think, and I think it comes from maybe ego or just in this individualistic, like Western mindset that we have that says, I got to find my own way. Finding your own way is a harder, my dad taught me growing up that you can choose the hard way or the most difficult way.
Yeah.
If you want to pick the hardest life you could ever live, it's go do everything that you think you're the first person to ever do.
Or say in your mind, well, I just have to do it my way.
I have to do it my way, because you're just going to end up with a lot of broken wheels.
Yeah.
And you're going to be sidetracked a lot. Like people that blaze trails, if you are blazing a trail, you should get behind another trailblazer, because people that blaze trails, they go through a lot more difficulty than people that don't. But when you can get behind someone who's a trailblazer or someone who's done it well, they just teach you how to follow that broken way.
It's one of the things I heard you say. It's like, it's interesting the things you catch as like an 11 and 12 and 13-year-old in messages. But I remember you saying multiple times, and it was one of the things that stuck with me. I think that's really impacted my life. Such a small thing that became a big thing is you would talk about how it's the fool that feels like he has to learn every lesson by experience, right? And that's like, that seems intuitive, right? Like, oh, I just need to go learn for myself. And you talking about that so often in the messages I remember is just what so stuck with me.
Well, and I think as a parent too, we all have young kids except for my dad. And I don't want to learn how to parent by experience, because Benjamin Franklin in The Way to Wealth, he said, experience teaches hard lessons, and those are the only lessons that fools ever learn.
A wise man learns from his mistakes. A wiser man learns from the mistakes of others.
Yeah, and so as a parent, you don't really want to learn by experience, because by the time you learn how to parent a 7th grader and no one taught you how to parent, it's too late to parent a 7th grader.
Well, I'll tell you this, coming back to a template, okay, as it relates to identity. Here was my perspective. I believe in God. I believe in me. I believe in we. Therefore, I believe in you. That's the path.
That's
So the
very good.
path is, in other words, you say, well, what do you mean identity? Like when speaking, well, yeah, it's pointing out the good that you see in them, yes, but it's instilling a belief, and that becomes a belief system, that becomes a winning belief system. So along the way, if whatever I believed wasn't getting us wins, I changed it. It was like, no,
that's the effectiveness question.
That's if it wasn't working. The effectiveness question is, how's that working for you? So you can believe whatever you want to believe.
You can think whatever you want to about life, parenting, whatever.
But everything starts with the belief. In my book, Your Divine Fingerprint, I talk about your beliefs are like the roots of a tree. So think about this in relationship to a family and in parenting. So your beliefs are the roots, and then your family is the tree, and then you're the tree, you and your spouse or whatever the situation is, and then the fruit of the tree is your children.
Right.
So when a kid is struggling with their when a kid is struggling with their identity, they're struggling with their belief in themselves.
Right.
So I want you to really think about what I'm saying. So for me, where it all started was, okay, God, I believe in you. I'm created in your image. So I've got to learn about God so that I can bear his image. Okay. So I believe in God, therefore I believe in me. Now I bring that belief into the we that I am a progenitor of, which is my family. So I believe, but then individually, I believe in you. And now let's go backwards. If I believe in you, it's because I believe in we. Well, what do we believe? What do we believe? There's the problem. The parenting problem is what we believe. Well, we don't have a we belief because we don't go to church. We don't have a we belief because we don't have any core values. Why would your kids do anything you say? That's what I'm asking. Like why would your children want to do what you say when there's no belief system in your home? Like the greatest thing, of course,
there's no proof in your own life. It's like,
of what you believe.
Like you grew up in a household that was very much do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
That was literally what your dad said to you growing up.
And what was crazy is, and y'all have heard the stories, but your listeners haven't, is my dad was like, one time he was just giving me the business, and he was saying, your mom wants me to discipline you. And I said, hey, and I'm looking him right in the eye. I go, like, that's the last time I ever want you to tell me that. He was just like in shock. I go, if you want to discipline me, Dad, discipline me. Don't blame it on Mom. Horrible parenting. Horrible parenting. So many men don't want to be the bad guy with their children.
Yeah.
So your mother wants me to talk to you about this.
Right.
You talk about a weak
loser.
No, I'm just
horrible
saying,
parent.
That's the only. I mean, is that too strong?
No, sir.
I'm just telling you,
truth.
it's horrible, and that's what men default to. It's like, well, your mother wants me to, or here's what your mother would like us to do, and a child's going, and who are you? Like, you're my dad, but you're not. You're not leading. You're not giving me anything to follow. Why? Because everything that's hard for you, you're blaming on Mom. That's how I was raised.
Well, and you extend that into your life. You blame it on your boss. You blame it on the country. You blame it on the culture.
So
like we in our family, we had a thing growing up that you never told us we couldn't afford things. Like you just told us that. You just told us that we're not going to spend that money right now. Now, it might have been true, like objectively, that we couldn't afford something, but that wasn't ever going to be the reason why. For us as kids, we didn't do something.
That was not the belief.
Because we're not going to think that way.
I didn't want to instill that. See, this is what parents don't realize. By default or by design, you're instilling beliefs that relate to the identity. So in other words, of your child, how do I see myself? Well, then the most important question that trumps that question is, what do you believe?
Right.
You believe that you're capable of
Making it
anything,
happen.
right? And so the reason you like, and I love this about you, and I feel like I learned some of these things from you. You won't even let that phrase come out of your mouth because you're rewiring your belief. To say I can't afford that is really the same thing as saying I'm not capable of having that, and that's a dangerous thought to have.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it starts with I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a belief system.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's a belief system. So,
and the thing you say is nothing in your life matters more than what you believe. Because if you don't believe it, even think about this, like even the Word of God, it can be not true in somebody's life because they don't believe it.
That's right.
And the Word of God can be true, but if you don't believe that it works, if you don't believe that it's true, then it nullifies even the Word of God in your own life based on your belief. Like there's a lot of people that believe like miracles don't happen. So of course, they're never going to see a miracle. They don't believe they could ever happen.
Yeah. You don't believe church is important, so you don't take your kids to church. Well, what is going to be their belief system? Here's what I can guarantee you. Your beliefs, whatever they are, or aren't directly affect your identity. How you see yourself based on why do I see myself the way I see myself? Because of what I believe. Like I believe I can be fit at 64.
Yeah.
I believe I can defy age. I believe that I have superpowers. Like I believe that core values based living works. I believe that following Jesus is the greatest and highest call. I believe that I'm put on the earth to advance God's kingdom. How does that reflect in my identity?
And I think the hardest thing, for like most people, truthfully, is you talk a lot about the difference between theory and transformation. Like as a young man, I guess I'm still young. I'm going to be 37 in a month. So
Yeah, you're still
I'm on
young.
the other side of
Until you
35.
hit 40, you're still young.
So Nick's, you're there.
Yeah, I'm just like, dude,
You're right there,
It's hard
aren't you?
talk. Yeah, it's hard talk for me.
Everything's practice until 40. I promise
but
you.
it's the difference between theory and transformation, because I can have all of these thought processes about parenting, about leadership. Like the real fruit of who you are as a person is what happens in your kids' lives. And nobody wants to maybe be honest about that doesn't have great kids.
Yeah.
But you can have all this theory and all this thinking all day. And if it doesn't bear fruit in your life, it's actually meaningless for you and everybody else. And that's the challenge that parents have is everybody knows, for the most part, I feel like everybody knows kind of the right thing to do or the way to approach things in a good way. It's just harder. So they choose not to do it, but then they'll try to get like, I know people that they eat horrible, like they eat horrible. They don't take care of themselves physically. They will never let their kids go to McDonald's, but they'll eat at McDonald's. It's like the exact approach that most parents
horrible.
have, because they want their kids to pay a price that they've so far been
you
unwilling
can't
to
teach
pay.
your children discipline without you having self-control.
100%. Right.
And they want it. You need it, but I don't have self-control.
Which that's the problem.
And that's because you have to wrestle within and I think this is what you did really great growing up. You wrestled within yourself. And this is what the book is really fundamentally about that I love, is that it's not about, hey, here's how to be a great parent.
Right.
It's really not the point of the book.
No.
The point of the book is if you devote, at the end of the book, this is really the point you make. If you devote your life to being the best person that you can possibly be, you will be a great parent.
Yeah.
And the problem that most people have is that they're not doing that. It's a bunch of theoretical stuff that they know to be true, but they don't want to do the hard work of applying it to their life.
They're living a life of either running from pain or running towards pleasure.
Exactly.
And that's going to produce awful parenting.
And you only see, me and you were talking about this the other day, because you were talking about being in your 40s, and you were kind of like just giving me game on, as I'm getting older, I need to work on, you said I'm a smart person, but I need to work on becoming wise, because there's a lot of ways I'm not wise. And so he was just talking to me about that. And he said, in your 40s is when you really start to see the fruit of your approach to your marriage, the fruit of your approach to your kids, because you get to this point, you've been married for 15, 20 years. You have kids that are maybe in middle school, and you're starting to see either the great foundation that's been set or the cracks in the foundation that's been set. And I love what John Wooden said. He said, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? And when you get in your 40s is when you start to see that. And so what do people need to do that have maybe been more on the theoretical side, which kind of is the average person, to even at that age, if they feel like, because a lot of people come to us with the questions, hey, my kids are older, they're teenagers. I feel like I've set bad patterns in place. What do I need to do to fix that or recover that or to become transformational?
Yeah. This is a big life question, and it's never too late to ask it. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody that, like one of the things I did recently it was actually a coaching call with some founders of a company that are wanting to take it from 700 million to 2 billion. And so we're kind of going down this line of thinking. Like, what is your definition? What would be your one definition of success? So again, just thinking parenting. What would be your one definition of success as a parent? What would be your overarching definition of success? I have many definitions of success, but there's two that are primary that have never changed and that have always been number one, number two. Number one, to be a person who reflects the image of God, and I want to please God. So to me, if I'm reflecting the image of God and I'm becoming who He's wanting me to become, that's number one. Number two, to have the respect of those that I love the most. You are not a successful person if the people that love you the most do not respect you.
Because the proof,
That's a
like
good definition.
the thing
That's
to
good.
me is, we're all going to face criticism. You know, I've watched you my whole life be very vehemently criticized by people. But the thing that you can't argue with is fruit. And when people, no matter what people say about you or about any one of us, when people look at your family and how much love and honor that we have for you, I think even with the people around us, that's the proof. Is there's people that come and go in the world that we're in, but the way I feel about you and the honor that I have for you and how much I want to, I wouldn't say, I mean, I want to please you, yeah, but it's not like that. It's more like how much I want to live up to who this family is and why these core values matter to me. I want to do that because I saw your own personal greatness that I want to live up to. And that's the fruit of striving for greatness. I mean, I would call you great. You would probably say that you're just striving for greatness. But that's the proof of it that is just bedrock in our family, in our life. We're going to keep moving forward because you've helped us to establish who we are, how we roll. There's fruit now at 64 that, hey, you might not like it. Like a person might not like it. Person might not like the way you live or whatever, but it works.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, you don't have to choose the path, but again, whoever you are, if something's working and if something's proven, at least it's something that children can follow.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the biggest deal. Through the years, I've had all kind of criticism about everything that, just like you said, Josh. But,
And everyone will on some
Yeah.
level who's
Yeah.
like you always say, I love what you say about greatness. You say like the greatness that you have will either inspire people, intimidate them, or make them jealous.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
2 out of 3 people,
Yeah.
when you're striving for greatness, aren't going to celebrate
Right.
your
Yeah.
strive for greatness.
yeah, and they may not vibe with who you are, but that's okay. It's like I've had people in my life where I say, you know what? Like, I'm not for you. So you need to go find who is for you or go be for you for somebody else. In other words, if I'm not that guy, but it just goes back to when I was 24. I'm going to make everybody my teacher. Therefore, I'm not going to judge what somebody's not. But hey, you know what? When somebody has any kind of fruit or proof in their life, and that's what children need. Like, this actually works. That's the only. I'm just telling you. If any way that I had been, and I'll say this to you, Nick, if any way I had been as a parent, as a father, as a husband, that my children observed that didn't work, it would have given them all the permission that they need to do it their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like I like you were a millionaire by the time you were 40.
Yeah.
I very young you have a whole money template that you use. I've never not used that in my life. So I was a millionaire by the time I was 35.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I went out and made a bunch of money or like did a bunch of crazy business deals or anything like that. I just followed a template.
Yeah.
So I saw you win with money. So then I'm going to win with money because I didn't have to create any of this stuff. I saw you win with mom. So the way, you celebrate mom on the 20th of every month. I celebrate my wife on the 1st of every month. That's me and Courtney's anniversary. So this month, or going into June, it's getting ready to be June while we're recording this. That'll be 143 months we've been together. I'm just following that template.
Quick side note. Sometimes I'll text Garrett because he's really good with math. I said, let me just check my math because now I'm up to 581, but I want to make sure it's at the right. I want to get but I'll send him. I sent him this last month ago. Just check my math on this. I think I got it right, but my point is,
Well, it gets funky. It's like, do we count the month that we
I
started?
know,
Is the next month the one?
Exactly.
But I think for me, I mean, there's challenges and significant issues I've had to navigate in my life and still have to. But with you, I've avoided so many issues that other people my age, whether it was in my 20s or my 30s or heading into my 40s, other people my age would have because I just had a template to follow in you as my dad. And the older I get, the more valuable that becomes. And I think for every parent that's listening to this, that's the potential that you have is like whatever battles that you fight and you win, your kids don't have to fight those battles. Like I don't have to figure out in my 30s how to do money right.
There's inherently a challenge in this. It's not, I don't want to be misleading to anybody and say that this is easy. It does come back to what you say, Pastor Keith. I know this is where you start your coaching. You started it with me. It's where I start with a lot of people. I know it's where you start with most of your people is what do you want, right? It's a what do you want question. So what do you want out of parenting? what I know you want out of parenting, what you've taught, is a legacy.
Yeah.
And what is a legacy? I think Jesus is the best example of legacy. He went to, as he passed the disciples, he didn't say, like me. He didn't say, believe in me. He said, follow me. And he meant follow me in the context of, there's, the poor will always be among you, but I won't always be. There will be a time when I'm not here to heal them. You have to keep doing the work that I've started. And that's really what the definition of a legacy is, that people would follow you after you leave.
Yeah.
And I think, so that's really what this book is about, is to leave that type of legacy. And you have to want that. If what you want as a parent is, I just want my kids to like me, I want someone to take care of me when I'm old, it's probably not the book for you.
Right.
But if you want children who will follow you after you've died,
Yeah.
right? And honestly, what you know is that Josh will write new things into the craft code that, his children he'll add to it. He'll make it better. I'm getting to do the same in my family. But any great father, that's what he wants. Here's a path, son, that you can follow me, and you can follow me after I'm gone. And they want to, right? The disciples wanted to follow Jesus. They followed him all the way to their own death. That's how much they believed in the legacy that he started. So that's really the power of it. It's not an easy thing to do, though.
Yeah. Well, David said it like this in Psalms 25. It's one of my favorite passages of Scripture. He said, Lord, show me your path, teach me your way, and lead me into the way of everlasting. And as a parent, if we could think, I'm not trying to be my children's hero, but at the same time, if you live a life that is worthy of following, you'll be your children's hero.
Yeah.
There's not one parent that doesn't want to be their children's hero. You're not going to be your children's hero, or you're going to make it very hard to be your children's hero if there's divorce. I'm just telling you, it's, and I'm not saying that to make anybody feel bad that's been through a divorce, but I'm just telling you, you're showing them that it didn't work. So in your next marriage, make it work. You can't develop this didn't work, because your kids will go, wow, I'll never get married then, because it doesn't work.
Well, and then they have to go figure it out. Like there's a great I don't know if you've ever heard the story. There's a great story of the Rechabites in the Bible. So in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 35, it talks about these people called the Rechabites, and it's this really cool story. In 1839, so there was these people, God told them in the book of Jeremiah, here's what to go do. And it was this tribe of people called the Rechabites and all these different things. So in 1839, there was this reverend, his name was Joseph Wolf, and he went to Yemen, and he found a tribe claiming to be the Rechabites. They were claiming to be the descendants of this person named Jehonadab. And they were found near the Dead Sea, and they were doing all of the things still. This was 1,800 plus years later. They were doing all of the things still that the book of Jeremiah told them to do. They were like this unreached, uncontacted people group. And psychologists say that what you do in your life, this is psychology. The Bible says it's 1,000 generations. But what you do in your life echoes down 5 generations. And most people, I think, like you're saying, don't think of the importance of their life as that for their kids. But what God puts in place in your life, or what you put in place in your life, think about 5 generations from now, what that's going to look like. And does it look really good, or does it look, not so good? And I think that's one way that you've thought, that you've been willing to, when you pay the price for that, when you pay the price for that in your own life. I think, to me, I hear Garrett talk about this a lot. I think, to me, a lot of the things that I'm doing, they're not worth it for me. And that's why people, I think, don't do them, because they're like, it's not worth it for them as an individual to go pay all this price and to do all this, when most people, they just want to be happy. So how can I find a way to be happy? Or how can I find a way to feel comfortable or feel fulfilled in my life? Your life's about so much more than that. Your life is about what is the battles you're going to go win, and the giants you're going to conquer in your life, so that God can do what he wants to do in your family 5 generations from now. And it's a completely different way to think. But if you think of yourself, I think if you think of yourself and your life as that important, that 5 generations from now, someone will find your family and go, wow, like there's a family on the earth that's doing this, you would probably consider your decisions a lot differently. Because it wouldn't just be about you and your spouse and how you feel about that.
For the good or for the bad.
For the good or for the bad, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you have, I grew up around with you guys as parents who were great parents. You had a great marriage, you had a great relationship. Half of my school class growing up was from divorced homes. And every kid that comes from a divorced home, they're not better for it. All statistics, all data show that. So with all due respect to divorce, but if you get divorced, you're selfish because you're really not considering your legacy. Now there's different reasons, and I'm not just qualifying that statement with everything. But when you think that way and you think about how it's going to affect your kids and how it could affect things 5 generations from now, it would be a totally different discussion if you thought that way versus, oh, do I like this person?
Well, you probably think twice about marrying them in the first place.
Absolutely, 100%.
So think about this. Why does the Bible say that God hates divorce?
Yeah. Yeah.
If God hates it, how are your children going to feel about it? And so again, not saying to make anybody feel bad. I want you to understand, if you've been divorced, you still have a chance with your kids.
Yeah.
You still have a chance to talk to them about your life lessons. You still have a chance not to talk about what your spouse did wrong. That would be a horrible mistake. And again, many parents do that. They make that. Well, here's.
I heard you say that multiple times growing up. The worst you would. Yeah, I feel like you've always had a heart for people who've walked through divorce, and you would say that growing up. The worst thing. It doesn't matter if your ex is the worst person ever. The thing that will ruin your children the most is if you talk negatively about your ex.
Right. And it's so difficult when you've been hurt. So difficult when there's been infidelity. So difficult when here's the reason, and you're better than they are, and it's so easy to come across like that. But if you have your children's heart, which you do, if you have your children's heart to consider, then how can you help them be healthy even when you've been unhealthy? How can, and this is where life lessons come in, that are so important. But I love that, Josh, what you said, because I think what's been lost is, again, back to, do you believe in God? If you believe in God, you have a chance to really believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you have a chance to establish something that now it's not just about me, it's about we. And then you become a person that's able to say to your children specifically, I believe in you. Why? Because I believe in us, or we. Yeah. I believe in we because I believe in me. I believe in me because I believe in God. I want that to be everybody's takeaway they can on this. Yeah. Because you say, how do you speak to the identity of your children? Give them something to follow. What my identity is in Christ. Like, I want to identify with God. I want to know His Word. Why? So that number one, I can believe in who I am in the earth. So,
what did you learn about parenting Josh? That, because if you don't know Josh and Pastor Keith, they're opposites. Josh is so different than Pastor Keith. What did you learn in parenting Josh that, okay, so it's easy to, if your children are just like you, it's easy to see what's in them. But because he was different than you, what did that teach you about parenting and seeing the greatness in him?
It taught me, number one, to focus on his greatness that was different than mine. And I can tell you that's 100%. It was like, it was never like, I just want you to be like me. I didn't want I didn't want him to be like me. There's a story I tell where we were going through I'll let Josh tell it. We were going through a toll booth when they still had toll booths. And
yeah, we were going through a toll booth, and they still kind of have toll booths, but this is when you didn't have toll tags. And so you had to pay the person. So he pays the person at the toll booth, and he looks at them while we're driving through the toll booth and says, I just want you to know that you have a great day, and I just want you to know God loves you and has a plan for your life. We just drove through. And so like 5 minutes later, I go, I could never be like you. And I could never be like that. I could never just talk to somebody like that. I'm an introvert, blah, blah, blah. And you said, well, you don't have to be like me. You just have to be the best version of yourself. Right. But the thing that's interesting about that to me is we recently had a camping trip with the Mighty Men in our church. And I never thought that I would be like you. I always thought I'd be this like introverted person. And this is what happens in your kids, I feel like, when they become when you become a template, is they just follow the template, and they get to where God wanted them to be that they never saw in themselves. Because at 13 or however old I was, I didn't see that in myself. I didn't see myself ever being an initiator of helping someone just like level up in a moment. I didn't think I could ever do that. So I'll try to make this long story short, because Garrett and Nick were there for it. And I think it's a really cool story. So
tell it, man. That's a great story.
So there's a guy there who's a friend of ours named JT. We're all friends with him, and he brings his brother-in-law around. His brother-in-law a few years ago diagnosed with a really severe case of muscular dystrophy. And so when you look at him, he doesn't have any muscle on his chest. His arms are basically just like skeleton arms. And so JT's showing me, he's pointing over at his brother-in-law. And he's like, yeah, my brother-in-law's here. They think he'll be in a wheelchair in 6 months, but he's here at the camping trip. And then he tells me about this brother-in-law's name is Jake's. He tells me about Jake's daughter, who was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy the same, like a month later. And she's got the same deal, but she's only 21. And they have another daughter who's 16. They don't test for muscular dystrophy until you're 18, but she's 16. She only weighs 88 pounds, and she has all the signs of muscular dystrophy. And so they're gonna take her through the testing. So I hear JT, and I'm just talking to him. So I walk up over to Garrett. Garrett's running all these Warrior games. And I go, hey, can we just, after one of these games, can we just gather all the guys? And Garrett's like, sure. So I call this guy Jake out. I haven't met him. And I just tell Jake, I said, you're in an environment, we believe in absolute healing. We believe that God wants to touch you, and just prayed for him, right? And we prayed for him as a group and prayed for his family. We're still praying for them. And so that night, Garrett, we all get up, and there's 250 guys at this camp. So Garrett has guys get up and share their testimony about what happened. And so JT, who's not an emotional guy, gets really emotional. He's looking at me, talking to me, and he says, you'll have no idea. You have no idea what that means, that you encourage my family in that moment. And I had just a personal revelation, and I shared it with the guys the next day, but I had a personal revelation in that moment. Is like, that was me. I've seen you do that. I've seen you do that my whole life. I've seen you be that my whole life, whether it's toll booths or different environments where you just step in and you do something that you feel like, whether it's God saying it or something you feel like you wanted to do. I've seen you do that. And when I was a kid, I never thought I could do that. And then I'm sitting at 36 at a camp where I did that, and I had no hesitation. There wasn't any like insecurity in that. I did that, and I heard said about me what I heard said about you my whole life, because I was just following a template. And that's the power of you stepping into your greatness as a parent or as a person. And it's hard, and you got to navigate your own insecurities and whatever that is. But you create this trail for your kids that they have no idea how God wants to use them. That I'm at that camp and I'm just like hanging out with all my friends, but made a significant impact in somebody's life that if I wouldn't have had you as a template, I probably would never even be approaching what I'm doing right now.
See, this is like where just some of the genius of you, Pastor Keith, and your wisdom and discernment. Like, people, no parent that's listening to this ever talked to their kid, had their kid not talk back to them because they were however years old, gibberish, and went, well, I guess they're just not a talker, right? They all knew that they needed to talk to them, right? Because they were going to learn by seeing and hearing, and then eventually they're going to get to doing. And so most people will be like, well, yeah, that's in English, and they'll learn how to walk eventually because we'll keep trying. But they breeze past that pattern of like, these kids are looking at you to learn not just how to speak English, but so many things. Whereas you have the discernment to look and go, no, saying we can't afford it is actually going to affect them here. Like, you see the ripple effect of it going on. And that's where, like, I love hearing you always talk about, like, no, there's templates to these things. I feel like you see a pattern.
Well, I want to jump back to what Pastor Keith said earlier, because it's the foundation that he said. I believe in God. Yeah. I believe in me. And I believe in we, right? And then I believe in us, right?
I believe in you.
Yeah, I believe in you.
Yep.
So he could have been, a guy like Pastor Keith, all the talents that he has, like my dad's testimony of who Pastor Keith was is just like extremely talented, great speaker, great athlete, singer. My dad's like, man, I can follow that guy. Yeah. I'm not saying Josh isn't those things, but because Josh is different than Pastor Keith.
I'm still waiting on you to sing with Danny Goki, bro.
Pastor Keith could have been discouraged in who Josh was. Yeah. But he didn't. He wasn't believing in Josh because of what he saw on the outside. He was believing in Josh because, son, I know God has a plan for your life. And that's where it doesn't matter who your child is, that you can feel that way about them and see the best in them, because not because of who Pastor Keith says he is, but because of who God says he is.
Yeah. Now, can I ask a question? Because you guys have taken some of my questions. It's been great. You've not even seen a list. Fantastic. So Pastor Keith, if I can just ask you this, from a not even hypothetical, but if we were going to like just design the family, can you give us like the family structure and roles for parents according to God's plan as you read it in the Bible? So I think you're so good at seeing templates, just that wisdom to say, here's the actual structure. Because like I said, you changed my life when you said, fathers, it's your responsibility to give your kids. I was like, oh, check. I better get this stuff in place. And guess what? We have. And guess what's amazing? My kids are a replication of me and my wife. They are like representing our family well. It's one of the proudest things I can say.
Yeah. So there's a lot I could say with that, but I'll just boil it down to one passage of scripture that is the template, and that's John 15. So it starts with Jesus saying, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Mm-hmm. So he goes through this and he says, as long as you're connected to me, then you'll be fruitful. But if you're not, you'll be like a branch that's separate and cast into the fire. And anything and everything you do will be consumed by fire. It'll be consumed by struggle. It'll be consumed by difficulties. It'll be consumed by your obstacles. He said, but if you stay connected with me, you'll bear fruit. And he said, you'll not just bear fruit, but you'll bear much fruit, and then you'll bear fruit that remains. That is the biblical model for families. In other words, the father and the mother, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And so stay connected. But here's the problem is, again, stay connected to what? Like if I believe in God, if I believe in me and I believe in we, then I've got to say to our children, and here's a question I would say to every parent that's listening. So for us, what's the craft way? What's the Uncle Bach way? What's the surface way? That your children, and that's what I strive to do, and Josh could speak to that more than I can. But that's what I strive to do through establishing core values. That's what I strive to do, establishing a family mission statement. What was I doing? Something that we could always connect on, no matter how different we all were. So they grew up with a family mission statement. They grew up with core values. Those were structures that we put in place to keep the vine strong, so that the branches had a chance to bear fruit.
Right.
And so that again is why God and why church and why, more importantly, the kingdom is so important. So you're asking me from the Bible, that's what I would say. There's a lot of things I could refer to, but beyond that, I would simply say this, that if I'm a parent and I struggle with insecurity, I'm going to probably breed children that struggle with insecurity. If I'm a parent and I struggle with immaturity, I don't ever grow or mature, how can I say to a kid, I believe in you, because I don't believe in myself?
Right.
If I'm a parent that I've made more bad decisions than I made good decisions, how can I say to a child, like Paul said, here's another biblical example, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Follow me as I follow Christ. In other words, there's got to be, if you're a parent, there's got to be something about you that's followable, or your kids are going to be all over the map.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just going to be doing their own thing. So there's a lot of parents, and even Christian parents, not necessarily kingdom-minded parents, but Christian parents who just say, well, I just want the best for my children. I want them to find themselves, and I don't want to try to tell them, what to do and who they are, and there's no structure.
The parents just say, well, we're not going to make our kids go to church. I want them to want to go to church.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's actually one of the, so this, man, you guys are segueing perfectly without even meaning to. So that was actually one of the things. I mean, for one of the needs that you say is that you need to be a person that's committed to God, right?
Yeah.
Be a person of commitment, right? And because they need to learn tenacity. And so what I love about the book is you have the letter, and then you have what the kids wrote. So here's what Pastor Josh wrote. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is just one thing, because I think this will really hit home for people.
So again, just so you don't pass over it too quick, read what the child wished their parent knew right there.
Yeah, yes, sir. It was, let me get back to that. It was, I need you to be a person of commitment because I need to learn tenacity.
Okay. So that's that now.
Yeah. So this is how this is where it's so wonderful, because you get to hear the kids talk about how they learned this. So this is what Pastor Josh said. He said, everything we did as a family, we did together. If my parents were at a church event, so were we. If my parents were working on something, they brought us with them as much as they possibly could. This lifestyle was counter to sports leagues, school schedules, social calendars, birthday parties, and more American cultural elements that many families feel entitled to. So it makes sense why most parents, Christians included, will go with the flow of culture when it comes to their commitments, all because they want their kids to have friends, play sports, learn instruments, and have educational and social advantages. However, the focus of the kingdom is not playing sports on weekends, taking AP classes, or getting into Harvard. The question is not what we want to do with our lives or what our kids want to do with their lives. The question is, what does God want us to do with our lives?
So this is a parent, I'm going to tell you a parent fail, is to be committed to your children's ECAs, extracurricular activities, and your children are not committed to the we of the family, because you have no we of the family, and you make the we of the family about the ECAs, the extracurricular activities of the children.
And you make your kids the CEO of your families. You don't even realize it. I mean, like
so good.
There's people I'm around now. I'm around them, and I don't like being around them because their kids run everything. Like, you go to their house, you don't want to go to their house because everything's about their kids.
It's
And I
not.
think
It's not leadership. That's what
Right.
people don't
That's
realize.
it.
It's not.
That's it.
You're not. Your job is not to provide.
cater to the
Yeah.
whims of a child.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, you know, I mean, and y'all did, we did stuff. I mean, you put us in sports, and I played sports and all that stuff. We did all that stuff growing up, but it did not get in the way of what we were doing as a family. Like when we were doing church and we were doing kingdom, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's the state game on a Saturday. We have a church thing, or we have something that we're doing as a family. It didn't matter what I had going on in the summer. Like during the summers, we were with y'all. So we would go to conferences and we would go to whatever we were doing as a family. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm missing out on camps or I'm missing out on all this other stuff. And I think what people don't realize, right? Like there's this really interesting thought, right? So people misunderstand Abraham in that they think that God just came and told Abraham, go to the promised land. And that was where it started. If you read Genesis 11, which is right before Genesis 12, where God talks to Abraham, you can see at the end of Genesis 11, Abraham's dad says, let's go to the land of Canaan. So his dad says it. It wasn't God just showing up and going, I'm going to take you to a land you don't know and you've never heard of this and you're just some guy. It was Abraham's dad said, we're going to go to the land of Canaan. And it was 1,000-mile journey, and they went 400 miles and they stopped. And then God basically says to Abraham, he doesn't say, go out and do your own thing. He says, go finish the journey your dad started with you.
Yeah.
So that's the
So
opportunity
good.
we
That is so
have
good.
as parents, is to bring our kids on the journey, not to go, well, kids, what's the journey going to be for us? Like you're letting your kids make decisions that affect things super long
Yeah,
term.
and I want to suggest this too. Okay, and I mean it, but I mean it when I'm saying it this way. I want to suggest it. We don't know why the father stopped. But I don't think it would have taken 75 years for Abraham to start if his father hadn't stopped.
Yep. So they went 400 miles.
So what happens with fathers is they aren't committed to even what they say they're committed to. And think about it. Abram was 75 years old when God said, I want you to leave your family, leave your country. I'm going to take you to where you've never been. And then the Abrahamic blessing.
And I'm going to take you to the place your dad set out to go all along. Like, I think what's powerful is God does things intentionally through families. Like the kids that you have, God gave you those on purpose. The dreams in your heart, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of dreams we have that are our dreams, but then there's a lot that God's given us that I've realized the older I get, it's my job to really be in my parents' wake. You know, there's this story that I love of, there's a highway in Colorado. It's called the $1 Million Highway, and it's between Ouray and Silverton. And the only reason why there's roads and mountains in Colorado is because of money. All the silver mines that were up there, they had to pull money down. Well, this particular road, there's this guy named Otto Mears in the 1800s, and he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a series of dependable roads for us to be. It was called all the 14ers in Colorado were called the most treacherous mountain passes in all of America. And so y'all have been on this.
I was going to say, we've been up one of them recently. Yeah.
And so Otto Mears comes along and he says, I'm going to turn these into reliable roads that we can bring. We don't just walk up and down them. We can bring donkeys and carts up and down them. Well, now 2,300 cars a day drive on these roads. But they said during the 1800s that there's one particular 6-mile stretch of road that drops 2,000 feet over the 6-mile thing. If you ask engineers today, it would be an almost impossible road to build. And they did this in the 1800s. And they say the cost back then was $1 million per mile to build this road. That's what it would have cost in the 1800s. So that would have been close to $2 billion in today's money. So that road was originally a dirt pack road that now has been converted into paved roads. People drive motorcycles on them. They go on these roads every day. It's a really cool road to drive, but that highway would not exist without Otto Mears coming and saying, we're going to build this series of roads. And it took from basically the 1800s to the 1935. So 53 years after the construction started, the road was paved. And that's how God wants to use our life, is that it's way more than just, and I've seen that with you, like there's dreams that you have that are like really for our family that God's given you. And we have to, as parents, like we have to blaze this trail and commit to it, what God's called us to do, and then not let the kids, right? And that's what happens. Like you let your kids sidetrack what's the legacy that God's called you to leave, because they're not the adults. But what I feel like I'm supposed to do is take the trails that you're blazing and turn those into a highway. And that's the opportunity that I have because you blazed the trail. Well, why do so many kids have to start over? It's because their parents didn't leave them anything.
Yeah.
There's no trail that's been blazed.
Yep.
And so we have to start to blaze our own trail, but then we start to think, oh, that's what everyone should do. It's like, no, you should actually just get in somebody's draft and learn to be great. And then when their time's up, you turn that into a highway for everyone else that comes after you. That's actually what God's intended for it to look like. And the way you do that, I mean, I always love what you've said about success, is because really the fundamental, I use a lot of philosophical stuff, but the fundamental way that you say that, like, you will win in life if you do two things, and that you give God something to work with and you give people something to respect. It's not about being the perfect parent. It's not about having perfect kids, all of that. It's about, okay, ask yourself this question. What are you giving God to work with right now as a person, as a parent, as a husband, as a wife? And then what is it about you that your kids can respect? Like, there's so much for me that I have to respect about you and Mom. You've always been physically fit. You've always not been wealthy, but you've always handled your money well. You've always been emotionally healthy. You've on and on I could go. And so I can respect all of that. So why wouldn't I want to be around it and be with it? And so if you're like, okay, as a person, where do I start? Number one, get the book. But number two, start giving God something to work with and giving people something to respect.
Yeah.
It's very good.
That's so good, man.
Well, as we wrap up here, I want to ask you two quick questions, Pastor. So these are meant to be just, I know you're not scared of confrontation by any means. So first question, what is an unpopular parenting belief that you have?
I would say an unpopular parenting belief that I have would be that if you get your core values in place, and live those, that will be enough for your kids. And when the reason I say it's unpopular is because there's nothing in there about the Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that I say, well, the Lord would, in other words, it's unpopular because you have to really decide what matters most, and believe that it matters so much that your children that will be enough for your children. But I'm telling you, now and before I raised my kids, I believed that.
Yeah.
I believed, all the way back to, the story about Pastor Sheila and I believed all the way back, if I was very intentional about what matters most, that I would have the right people in my life. And therefore, when you get with the right people in the right place at the right time, the right things happen. So that's
I love that. It's principled. And that's where we see people winning in life that maybe aren't even followers of God, for sure, because they're principled.
And it's unpopular too, because it puts a demand on you to decide what that is.
That's good.
Now, real quick, Garrett, before you move to your second question, and because we have the fruit here, and we've talked about these things, so I want to actually, like I said, we're so fortunate that we get to be around these things, and it's just normal
all the time.
This is just like a normal. We're spoiled, man.
It's
like,
our tribe, man.
It is, man. I feel like we're in the greatest place in the history of the planet. Honestly, man, I feel that fortunate to be here. What are your core values, Pastor Josh?
On our family?
Your family core values.
Our first core value is honor. Our second core value is positive attitude. Our third is excellence. And our fourth is generosity. And then our fifth one is leadership. So on my family crest that you can see if you're watching, there's a crest. And so there's four pieces that are connected into a crest, but they're not touching each other. So we have a crown that represents honor, a heart that represents positive attitude, a book that represents excellence, and a tree that represents generosity. And then they all come together to form the family crest, which is leadership.
And what's your family mission statement, which you also have tattooed on yourself?
It's right there. Never allow good to be the robber of the best.
So this is what I'm saying. Like, I hope when you were listening to this, you caught, like, this whole podcast is about what's possible. It's the impossible life. That you caught a possible of a man who said, this is what our family name is going to mean. These are our values, and I'm going to live them out and display them. I was going to say, no matter what, you're a regardless person.
No matter what.
So that your son, you answered a question I was going to ask about what it means to you to be number two, because I don't think many people have ever seen a legacy where a son comes up and says, hey, what you blazed is my responsibility to make a highway. I mean, that's an incredible opportunity
my kids are being raised in a family with the same core values. We have the same family mission statement. This crest is on the wall in our house. Our family mission statement's on the wall in our house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I was raised. And so I'm the second my kids are now the third, they're really the second generation being raised in it, but they're the third generation of our family that's going to do that.
That's amazing. I know how much that means to you, PK.
It does. It is the life win.
Yeah.
It's like if I died today, I would be happy with that.
Yeah. And it's not because you have everything figured out, but like, we like to say, I don't like saying, oh, nobody's perfect, because that's just such a cop out. Like, yeah, nobody's perfect, but some people are fundamentally better than other people. So get over it. That's kind of like,
Nobody's perfect.
there's no such
Jackson.
thing as a perfect basketball
again,
player, but Michael Jordan was pretty much better than everybody. So that's how it is.
And then when you break down what makes somebody better, then that's what you can benefit
Yeah.
from.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like in our family, I just had a great template. So if you want your family to win, you have to be great as a person. You just have to be.
Yeah.
You can't have excuses. You can't have reasons. You can't go, if you just say, well, we're just normal people and we're just going to live our life. That's what you sentence your kids to, is a life of average and mediocrity. So stop thinking about yourself as just a normal person. You have, if you want your kids to be great, you have to believe in your own greatness. And I've had my own battles to fight. I've had my own challenges in life. Without y'all doing what you've done and having the core values that we've had and all that, there's no chance. There's just no opportunity. And now I just feel like I'm living up to the standard that's been set and established. That is not personality. It's not your personality. It's not, it's principles, like Garrett's saying, that have been established that just work. And so I've had to learn in my life, I think, to not base it on a personality and to go, you know what, like the principle of honor or like positive attitude, excellence, generosity, none of those are personality traits.
Right.
You don't go take the Myers-Briggs and they tell you, oh, you're more honoring.
And that's why I'm saying when you speak identity, your what matters most helps
principles.
shape that. Yes.
Yeah. So good.
So,
So
before
good.
we'll go to the last question, but I want to give you a chance to answer.
Okay.
What's an unpopular opinion you have about parenting?
How much time do we have? Hold on.
What's an
Just one.
unpopular opinion that I have about parenting? I mean, I think I said it. I don't think your kid should be the CEO of your family. I think that you're the one that decides what your family does, and not every external thing that's happening in culture. Like you fit culture into your family, not the other way around.
Well, and actually, what he said, I actually wanted to highlight it, and it was your question, so I'm not trying to answer for you. But what he said about your kids are the ultimate reflection of you. That's a 100% ownership question, right? Because you can't hide from that.
Well,
You
I
can't
think
say,
that's probably the more unpopular one,
Yeah.
because you have to wrestle with it.
Because
Yes.
a lot of people would give the reasons why it's not their fault.
Yeah,
Right,
your kids. Here's like the summary statement. Like your kids are the most accurate reflection of everything about you that exists on this planet.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you want to get real with yourself about where you're at as a person, look at your kids and however they are. Like if you're filled with fear, I bet your kids have a lot of anxiety.
For sure.
100%.
If you're losing in life, I bet your kids are also losing in life too, because they're a reflection of that.
Yeah.
So your your kids are you are.
Right.
Your kids are
Right.
They represent you.
They show you who you
They
are.
represent
Yeah.
the you that
they
you
represent
are.
the you that you are. So
Your
kids are who you are.
kids are your.
Y-O-U-R kids represent the you, Y-O-U, that you are. That's
it.
that's a new leadership policy right there.
Yeah, I mean that's in essence
true.
that's it. So if you can own it that way. The other thing I'll say, Garrett, too, I know you only asked me for one. But
We can go lots of unpopular opinions.
very unpopular is that because your kids are you are, then when they're struggling with their identity, I don't know if I'm a boy or a girl, that comes back on you are.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, they're not kids, they're your kids.
Right.
So if they're your kids, it's like, why is my kid struggling with this? Obviously, I'm not speaking into who you are based on who we are, based on who I am, based on who God is.
That's right.
Let me give you like one more. Can you just throw
Okay.
in one?
Yeah, go for it.
So I
the
think
Unpopular Opinions
I
podcast.
think the other one is that your kids don't belong to you. Like
Yeah.
you're a steward of your kids. Your kids are not. Your kids are not yours to do everything for. They're yours to teach how to live, because one day your kids won't live with you.
I don't remember who it is, but it's an old theologian, and I love this saying, is that God has no grandchildren. He only has children.
very
So they
good.
don't belong to you.
They don't belong to you. So you have a responsibility. Like I have a responsibility to expose my kids to things that challenge them, to dangerous things, to things that force them to do things for themselves. I heard this really great quote the other day. Let me just pull it up real quick. Let's find it.
That was Pope Pius the 11th, by the way, Garrett, in 1930. That said that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
It
problem.
was Pope Pius the 11th.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Looking on this, I don't know, man. I did a quick Google search.
We'll have to dig into that.
Yeah,
one.
we'll dive into that one. That's actually Michael Scott that said that.
Anyway,
Famous philosopher.
one of the great thoughts that I've heard recently on this is the way to sabotage your kids is to do for them what they can do for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what culture reflects today, is that you have adult children that are still living in their parents' house. You have children that are still being taken care of. You have parents that are raising kids that aren't like, I don't want my kids to be afraid of life, afraid of like uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
I want to teach them how to navigate that.
It's so funny you say that because
I was waiting to get that in there for Josh's sound.
so funny you say that because that's kind of like informative of what my theological philosophy is. And say as I was like beginning to shape that, something I knew was wrong was where people wanted God to do for them what they could do for themselves.
Yep.
With God, you can get to the top of the mountain all on your own. You can't get more than 36 inches above the mountain, even if you're LeBron James.
Yeah.
It's where God can take us further than we could ever go. Right. And I love that that's your
Yeah, but like you've always said, like God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself, but he will not do for you what you can do for yourself.
Right.
And that's the same with parenting. I'll do for my kids. Well, I want to do for my kids what they can't do for
Right.
themselves, but I'm not going to do for them what they can do for themselves.
you rob them.
It's ruinous.
So we'll go to the last question. I'll let you answer, and,
Okay.
then, and then Pastor Keith will finish. So we did unpopular opinion. Now I'll just ask you, what's one general piece of wisdom that, maybe outside of the book, like a tip or a tidbit that you would say that every parent should try to implement, or at least something that's been very valuable for you as a parent?
Well, I think the simple thing is what I said a second ago, and that's if you really want to win in parenting, it's not this compartmentalized. I'm going to win in parenting, but I'm not going to win in business, and I'm maybe going to win over here in these. It's a principled approach. So, principled approach is if you win in life, if you win in every area of your life. Like some people, you can raise kids that are really great business thinkers, but they're really bad at relationships because that's what a lot of men or whoever do. Like hard charger people that are listening to this podcast, like, yeah, you could go work 80 hours a week, and that's what you'll teach your kids, is that success is money and success is in influence and 80 hours a week type stuff. But if you want to win in life and you strive to be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be, you'll be a great parent. And the secret to that is the two things that I said earlier, and that's just give God something to work with. So what can you give God to work with? Spirit, soul, and body in your life right now. How can you honor him? How can you put him first? How can you make your life about God's kingdom? And the second thing is just give people something to respect. It's not about doing everything right. It's about just being a person that you're respectable. Like, are you really respectable by your spouse? Are you really respectable by your kids? And you'll win, and you'll be a great parent. Someone asked me recently, they said, what's the best parenting book you've ever read? So now I can say Dear Parent, but this book wasn't out before. I said, the best parenting book I've ever read is my parents' lives.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to read a bunch of parenting books. I'm just going to strive to be a great person. And I think with God, it's an organic, holistic thing that if you strive to become everything that God's called you to become, you create a wake that people go, you know what? I'm going to follow that.
Very good.
It's amazing.
Pastor, same question to you. Maybe just a last piece of wisdom and any closing thoughts you have.
Yeah, really just in one statement. You're not going to be a great parent if you don't want to be a great person. And that's really what Josh was saying. It's not about parenting. It's not about marriage. It's not about business. If you don't want to be a great person, nothing in your life is going to be great. It'll never be great. And you'll never be a great husband. You'll never be a great wife. You'll never be a great parent. You'll never be. So if you want to be great, I'll quote the famous Jim Carrey. So you're saying there's I have a chance.
1 in a million.
There you go.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
That's how I would end it. That ultimately it comes back to, I believe, based on the Abrahamic blessing, that God says, if you'll leave your family paradigm, if you'll leave the country paradigm, if you'll follow God and go to where he wants you, he will make you great. I believe everybody's called to be great, and if you'll take responsibility for your personal greatness, you have a chance to be a great person. You have a chance to be a great parent. You have a chance to have great kids and a great family.
Man, I don't know how you can't love Pastor Keith, man. Just listen, I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
So once again, guys, the book's Dear Parent. You can go to dearparent.org. We're going to link to it in the show notes. Follow Pastor Keith online. It's Keith Craft on everything, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram. He's always dropping wisdom bombs. I hope y'all enjoyed that, and thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Such an honor to be with you guys. I'm proud of y'all.
Man, we appreciate you. This podcast literally wouldn't exist without you. Your fingerprints are all over it. So
you.
we love you. We appreciate you guys.